to another podcast from Cut to It, the nursing OR podcast brought to you today by Bloomwell Consulting. I'm Dr. Rosemary Babo, and I am a medical affairs education specialist, OR nurse, and I'm one of your co-hosts. Over to you.
Thanks. Mary Ann Sanford here, registered nurse, operating room nurse, and medical affairs professional. We're really looking forward to speaking to you today. Thanks for joining.
And our topic today is Beyond the Beeps, Distractions in the OR. What do you think about that, Mary Ann? Were you ever distracted in the OR?
Of course, there's a lot going on and there's a lot of distractions depending. But what I found interesting was there was a study from 1914 or an abstract from 1914 from a gentleman, a surgeon, who talked about distractions in the operating room, one of which was a phonograph, which is a record player, for those who don't know what that is, one of those round record players. And they would play it in the operating room to soothe the patient because anesthesia was different back then too. So he considered that a distraction, but understood it was really important for the patient. But distractions are actually nothing new for us. We all know they exist.
And do you think that the decibels that people are enduring now are different than, of course, from 1914? We have all these loud orthopedic devices that really, from the studies I looked at, can bump up the decibels even to 110. Normal conversation is about 60. That's a quiet environment. And 70, you can actually feel a change. Well, you can't feel a change is happening, but your heartbeat can increase, your cortisol, and sometimes you even walk away with a headache. So let's talk about these distractions. What are you finding in the literature to really support what we're talking about today?
Well, there was a systematic review done by IAS in 2022, and they talked about the distractions in the operating room. The systematic review looked at about 10 studies. However, only 2 of the studies defined actual distractions, like what they were. So the other 8 didn't. And what they did was they talked about the strategies that they employed in the operating room. So one of the things they did was standardization of procedures. So my understanding would be not everybody has music playing in the operating room. So they either considered doing it or not doing it. Having no interruption zones so that there wouldn't be in a critical part of the case any distractions. Again, music off, trying to keep talking to a minimum, etc. One of the things that they had also was noise level monitors so that they can monitor the level of noise in the procedure and then look for ways to reduce the noise. They also, it was interesting, they said lens cleaning was a distraction. So when you pull out the lens from a laparoscopic case or a thoracoscopic case, that was considered a distraction because you lost the signal and the view of what you were looking at with the patient.
Well, that
So,
makes
by the way,
sense.
2 out of the 10 concluded music was very effective in the operating room and to them, not a distraction.
Well, I think in that study too, it had to do with the levels of the music. So if you're blasting music, which I have been in the OR with surgeons who are blasting the music and talking above it, and it's an issue because you are concentrating harder to hear what's being said over that music or even over somebody else speaking. And it really becomes a safety issue because if I'm sort of taking my eye off of what I'm doing, maybe even breaching a sterile field, which would be completely unfortunate, but I'm trying so hard to listen to what's needed. And also, I think too, as a circulator, having people come in and out of the room is also a distraction. And I was surprised at how loud the door opening did register on some of these studies that were included, how high that was. I mean, we knew the OR tools, orthopedics particularly, were very loud and it spiked up. But there's real damage that's being done, and it's really not something that you have to suffer with. And I actually did a project on my unit where you can buy from Amazon. Not that I'm promoting Amazon, there's other companies that probably have these, but it was a stoplight and it had red, yellow, and green because the unit was so noisy with nurses talking, people coming by, transportation, respiratory therapy, and we really want to create a healing environment as well as having other, a patient with their TV too loud. And this was a way to show, because you're not really conscious, I think, of it when you're speaking to somebody, how loud you are. I know I've had that situation before. I'm like, oh my God, I am so loud, because you get excited and you start talking and you forget that people are over there healing. So it was a visual way to show how many times we got up to the red level without even knowing it. So I encourage people to do that as a best evidence practice, as a quality improvement project, because there's plenty of literature that supports lowering the decibels to promote healing, patient safety, as well as healthcare safety.
That was
What do you
really
think?
novel, that idea. I like that. They were talking in the study about noise monitoring, so that's one really clever way to do it. I applaud you. That was really smart.
Yeah,
I
it
can
was
tell
like
you in the
20
operating
bucks. It
room.
was nothing.
Yeah, that's nothing. That's really cool.
Yeah.
I was going to tell you the story. We used to have a surgeon. The music wasn't loud, but the content was distracting. There were two surgeons in particular. One had the most intense rap music that was just not necessarily loud, but so distracting because of what you were hearing. And that was just a given. Nobody said anything and nobody challenged him on, this is not really helping us pay attention to the case. So we had that gentleman, and we had another gentleman. He was doing very complex head and neck surgery. And because it was that, he wouldn't use cautery because you didn't want to disrupt nerves, right? So he would be clamp, clamp, cut the whole procedure as he listened to the music from a musical that's ancient called Man from La Mancha.
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
And I probably could recite some of the songs. I'm not going to do that, but it was distracting because you heard the same thing with him for 4.5, 5 hours every time it came in. So it just became this constant distraction. And there was no telling that gentleman that you were going to be stopping or ask him to stop the music. That's just how he performed. And you had to do your best to ignore it. So the two different incidents, but clearly distractions on their own. And the other distraction is something you can't really do about. I always thought the autoclave was really noisy. It's right outside the operating room. It's hissing and belching, and then it beeps and all that. And you can't get away from that, right? You had to autoclave something. You try not to do it very often. But to me, that was always a distraction. Also because you're listening for it,
Yes.
which distracts you. Yeah, they're very interesting.
Well, I'm
So
hoping too that, with some of the technological advancements, they can address some of this. I know healthcare is a little bit slower in adoption of some of these new technologies, but I went to the World Health Expo, and there's really a huge emphasis on bringing healthcare along. So I was just at the World Health Expo, and there was really a big emphasis from the surgeons and the other people that were there as speakers to bring healthcare along with the AI and advancing technologies, because we are really in the infant stages. Even though, AI has been part of Epic and Cerner and some of those others that we've been using for a long time, there's really an opportunity for healthcare to grow. So I do hope that they'll really invest in some things like the autoclave or any of the somehow, I don't know how, I'm not in that field, but I would really like those, any of the orthopedic, the drills. There must be some way that we can bring that down in decibels, because how, I mean, orthopedics is it's huge, millions of surgeries a year. So it's something we have to pay attention to.
And I think it's a great idea, and companies need to know that their devices are distracting, right? They probably aren't hearing that a lot. We just take it for granted that a drill is going to make a colossal noise. When you're in the hood, that thing is making the fan. It's probably unlikely you'd fix that, but the fan is quite noisy as well. So I don't know that companies are aware of this, and it's maybe something people can bring up. And you spoke about new technology, and there was another study I saw, which I found fascinating. It's from 2017, so it's a little bit older, but it was considered a technical solution to the distraction problem. And what they had the OR staff at the field do was to wear headsets like you might have for a customer service representative, right? Not a headset that you like a Beats headphone or whatever. And they had them wear it. and it had an earpiece and a microphone. And it as soon as one, they also could play music through it. And you say, well, how could that be? Well, they all agreed on the music before they started. And then if a team member spoke, it would mute the music and it would allow the team member to be heard. What they determined was while the device was on, there was a 90% reduction in distractions and noise because they were noise canceling. So just like when you're on a jet, that you don't really hear the roar of the engines or the hissing of the air going by you. You just hear the ambient noise in the plane cabin. So that worked also for the operating room staff. It was interesting, the results though. The surgeons, it was cardiac surgery, by the way. And the surgeons and perfusionists, they loved it. Very good acceptance. They thought it was great. Anesthesia, about a little more than half said it was really, they had good acceptance, and about almost 30% thought it was good. But there was a little dissent among anesthesia. 9% thought it was only fair. So they didn't have the same happy result as the surgeons and perfusionists. Interestingly, nurses didn't really like it. I don't know if we're more critical. I can't speculate on that. But only 43% thought it was, they had good acceptance, right? But 57 thought it was just good. So there clearly was a dissent among the nurses. And I found that fascinating. It's actually a really interesting idea to use noise canceling headphones. I don't know about the music. I guess if they all agree on it ahead of time, then that's okay. But it's at least a try to reduce distractions and have the team, especially at the field, really focus on what the task at hand is and not get distracted by everything else going on, all the conversations by the circulator talking, and anesthesia and circulator thinking about the next case, whatever. So I thought it was novel, even though it's a little bit old. I thought it was a different way, interesting way to look at the problem.
Well, it's a solution to the problem, and I'm wondering if those nurses just don't like change.
Well, we've spoken about that before, right, in
Yeah.
earlier podcasts, but yeah, for sure. And also, I wonder if the nurse was tasked with setting it up, and that became another thing you have to do in the operating room when you're trying to get ready for a case. I'm suspecting that is. I don't know that anybody in any operating room or hospital would hire somebody to do that. So I'm suspecting that's another reason there was resistance.
Yeah, or maybe interfered with their cap or something like that. I don't know, but I do think that that is very valuable, and I like that someone's trying to address that. And one other thing that really stuck out in the information that I had on this topic is that the drills in ortho are equal in decibel to a motorcycle. And I've never even
Wow.
thought of that. Like, I'm like, oh, they're
Yeah.
loud, and yeah, I have to, like you mentioned, it's part of the job. It's what happens when you work in an ortho room. But when you think about it, when they get going, it's equal to what a motorcycle sounds like. And I just
Wow.
had the
Wow.
visualization of having a motorcycle in the OR when that was going on. It's just crazy, and how even if the patient is asleep, how they're still not completely out of it. Like, your body still registers things. So,
Mm-hmm.
it I think this has been a great opportunity for us to talk about something that is ever present. And there are, you know, ARN looked at it and said, yes, noise is a distraction, and they have some guidelines. But I think what you brought out earlier, definitely should have quiet during the timeout, during counts, some of the really, even identifying something that might be an issue. Everything should quiet down and stop, which we do if there's something that's going on. But you want to have a quiet as well before that issue, because maybe that was because of a distraction. I don't know. But I do think that hopefully somebody out there will take this on as a project, and any nurse engineers, I know you're out there too, maybe work on that to find out ways that we can really quiet down the orthopedic, equipment that they're using, and the autoclave.
And in cardiac surgery, which is noisy, and I always deflect back to neurosurgery, my
Yeah.
specialty. You need quiet zones in the neurosurgical realm for sure. So all of those specialties, and even general surgery if everybody's just talking a lot, right? Because that's a more of a, not routine, but more of a common case.
Mhm.
So for sure. And if it's been happening since 1914, somebody's got to work on it. So maybe someone will come up with some really good ideas. Hopefully today we brought some light on the subject and some thoughts about what people have been trying to do. So we hope that's helpful.
Good. Thanks for joining us today. I'm Rosemary. It's Mary Ann, and we are Cut to It, the Nurse Podcast. Please like, subscribe, or even send us an email at cuttoit@gmail.com, and we'll have that information at the end of this. Till next time.